It is time for us to make peace and stop the fighting. One love, one unity, got to break the bondage. No more borders around me, no more mental slavery. Bob Marley said it best, stand together and feel alright. But if we fight,
let it be for justice.
and if we war,
Let it be for justice.
at all costs,
Let it be for justice.
do what is right.
Let it be for justice.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Inequity, disparities, and violence, oppression, racism. No, I won't be silent. No, no more barriers for we. We will thrive, prosperity. Marcus Garvey. It is time for us to make peace and stop the fighting. One love, one unity, got to break the bondage. No more borders around me, no more mental slavery. Bob Marley said it best, stand together and feel alright. But if we fight,
Let it be for justice.
and if we war,
Let it be for justice.
at all costs,
Let it be for justice.
do what is right.
Let it be for justice.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Inequity, disparities, and violence, oppression, racism. No, I won't be silent. No more barriers for we. We will thrive, prosperity. Marcus Garvey said it best. None but ourselves can free your minds. But if we fight,
Let it be for justice.
and if we war,
Let it be for justice.
at all costs,
Let it be for justice.
do what is right.
Let it be for justice.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. 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 No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. We the people are from
Greetings and salutations, one and all.
so many of us can sing.
Welcome to Community and Finance right here on the night shift with DJ Kim and Steele.
Put the power in ourselves.
How you doing?
Child, in the news last week, another bomb overseas.
I want to say big ups to each and everyone locked in right now.
Street. Ooh,
Those on Tune In Radio.
ooh, boy, boy, boy. But if we fight,
Let it be for justice.
and if we war,
Let it be for justice.
at all costs,
Let it be for justice.
do what is right.
I want to say big ups to those who are locked in on the Foundation Radio Network, ClintonLindsay.com.
Let it be
Big ups, Mr. Lindsay.
justice. Let
How you doing?
it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for
See Mr. Lindsay handing out awards.
justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice.
Big things going on in the music industry in South Florida. I want to say big ups to those who are locked in out to New Jersey on NIE Radio. Hanging out to motivate New Jersey's finest.
To make peace and stop the fighting.
Blessings to you.
One love, one unity, got to break the bondage. No more borders around me, no more mental slavery. Bob Marley said it best, stand together and feel alright. But if we fight,
Let it be for justice.
and if we war,
say much love to those who are locked in out of New York.
For justice.
On Island Worldwide, exhibiting the power of music.
For justice.
China Nicole, Gary and the Jump Out production crew, much love to you.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Inequity, disparities, and violence. Oppression, racism, no, I won't be silent. No more barriers for we will thrive, prosperity. Marcus Garvey said it best, none but ourselves can free your minds. But if we fight,
Let it be for justice.
I say blessings to those who are locked in out of the UK.
Be for justice.
Top of the morning to you guys over there on One Harmony Radio. King Genius, Queen Genius, much love to you.
Let it be for justice.
let it be
I want to say much love to my Facebook Live family.
justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let
And Sweetness,
for justice.
blessings, bro.
Let it be for justice. Let
Yeah, man, it's been a minute.
it be for justice.
Miss you too, brother.
Let it be for justice.
Let it be, let it be.
No need for link up, yeah?
We the people are from royalty. Royalty. I wish so many of us can see. Keep the culture, be united, stop the violence. Put the power in ourselves, create the franchise. In the news last week, another bomb overseas. I'm so sick of these murders in the streets. Ooh,
Why I?
ooh,
Why I? Why I? Why I?
but if we fight,
Let it be for justice.
and if we war,
Let it be for justice.
at all costs,
Let it be for justice.
do what is right.
Let it be for justice.
Let it be for justice.
Kicking things off with the sound of China Nicole.
For justice, no matter
A track called Let It Be for Justice. And you know, whenever I play this song, it's something that we're addressing as it relates to the thing on our community
make peace and stop the fighting.
on a judicial level.
Love, one unity, got to break the bondage. No more books
In this case,
around me, no more mental slavery. But Marley said it best, stand together and feel alright. But if we fight,
Let it be for justice.
and if we war,
Let it be.
in this case, it's a bit of a cold case.
Let it be for.
And when I say a cold case,
it's right.
I don't mean it's one that is, well, you know, it kind of is one that is unsolved.
Let it be for justice. No matter
Depending on who you ask.
for justice. Let it be for justice. Inequity, disparities, and violence. Oppression, racism, no, I won't be silent. No more barriers for we will thrive, prosperity. Marcus Garvey said it best, none but ourselves can free your minds. But if we fight,
Let it be for justice.
and if we war,
Doing some multitasking over here, those of you that are watching. I got a little bit of
Let it be
an echoing going on Facebook Live, but I think it's sorted out now. Drop me a line, let me know what it is like over there.
let it be,
And remember, those on the Facebook Live, it's only a segment broadcast, so don't get too comfortable.
know what it costs, let it be for justice.
Use up the link in the description, it's pinned there. KevinStew.com is the place to be.
Let it be for justice.
Speaking of which,
What it costs,
those who are
justice.
locked in at the home of the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew, KevinStew.com.
We the people are from
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
royalty. I wish so many of
So glad to have you, couldn't do it without you, and you have my word, I wouldn't even try.
keep the culture, be you.
Hey sis, how you doing?
Put the power in ourselves, create the franchise.
Wanna say big ups to Melissa Jane,
Another bomb over
my sister from another mister.
murders in the streets. Ooh,
why I? Why I? Why I? Why I?
Inviting you to call a friend, tell a friend, friends of your friends, friends of your enemies, enemies of your friends. And your enemies too. Call up somebody, anybody, everybody. Let them know we're addressing issues over here. Thank you for the heads up, sis.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. 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 No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice.
Hey, Joanna Marie.
Let it be for justice.
How you doing? Want to say much love to the Reggae Global family. Those of you who don't know, you can catch me on a Saturday for the Saturday Stew on Reggae Global Radio, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Stop the fighting. One love, one unity. Got to break the bondage.
That one is a different kind of vibe than we do on the night shift.
Around me.
Over there, it's more music.
Slave.
Let's talk.
But Marley said it best, stand together and feel alright. But if we fight, let it be for justice. And if we war, let it be for justice. At all costs, let it be for justice. Do what is right. Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Inequity, disparities, and violence. Oppression, racism, no, I won't be silent. No more barriers for we. We will thrive, prosperity. Marcus Garvey said it best, none but ourselves can free our minds. But if we fight,
I just got some word from my guest for this evening. Let me know he's a bit delayed.
Let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice.
Due to some things tying him up at work.
For justice. We the people are from royalty. Royalty. I wish so many of us can see. Keep the culture, be united, stop the violence. Put the power in ourselves, create the franchise. In the news last week, another bomb overseas. I'm so sick of these murders in the streets. Ooh, why I? Ooh, why I? Why I? Why I? But if we fight, let it be for justice. Justice, let it be for justice. No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it.
So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the whole thing about Ed Salmela in the Bastrop, Texas area.
Let it be for justice. Why I?
That's pretty much what we'll be talking about. And we'll be talking with one of the brothers of Ed Salmela, who was one of the initial officers in the investigation, the whole investigation to the death of Stacey Stites.
Stop the fighting.
Which right now Rodney Reed is doing time for her murder. Not just time.
Around me.
Time on death row.
Mental slavery. But Marlis.
From back in 2019, you'd have heard me talking with David Fisher as it relates to the whole Rodney Reed conviction. And I've been trying for a little while now.
Let it be for justice.
to get someone related to Ed Salmela to be a guest on this broadcast.
Inequity, disparities, and violence.
I don't know what it is about getting someone to talk about this.
No more.
But there's always some kind of a delay. Tonight is no different.
Prosperity.
But no worries.
Guess God is set.
We'll address what we can until Lee can join us.
Minds, but if we fall,
I do want to say thank you to my segment sponsors.
and if we want,
It's important to big them up because they help to make all this possible. I want to say thank you to Pulse Media Group.
do what is right.
When being in the moment is priceless, let's go ahead and give them a link. 754-999-1140. What can they do for you? Everything you see here on kevinstew.com and more. You have an event you want to stream live, a wedding, a party, a graduation, a seminar, a church service, a funeral, you name it.
Let it be for justice.
They got you.
People are from royalty.
Let's get them a call.
I wish so many of us can see.
If you want to host
To stop the
your website,
put the power
yeah, you want somewhere to host your website,
franchise.
they host mine.
Last week another bomb overseas. I'm so sick of these murders.
So give them a call, 754-999-1140. Tell them Kevin Stew sent you. I want to say thank you to Althea and her Healing Heavenly Hands.
But if we fall,
Althea is a licensed massage therapist operating out of Broad County, North Miami-Dade and South Palm Beach counties. She comes to you, bringing her table, her oils, and over 20 years massage therapy experience.
do what is right.
Give her a call, 954-655-9000. Schedule your appointment today.
Let it be for justice. Let it be.
She only has one request outside of paying her,
Let it be for justice.
is that you get off her table and go sleep somewhere else.
Let it be for justice. Let
Because if you're anything like me, you're guaranteed to fall asleep.
what it costs. Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Why
I want to say thank you to the Global Base.
let it be for justice.
The Global Base is involved in it with over 30 years experience in the music industry. They do artist management and bookings.
It is time
They do event planning,
to stop the fighting.
music production, marketing and promotion.
Unity got to break the bondage.
Give them a call, 954-804-8199.
To slavery. But Marley said it
That's 954-804-8199.
right. But if we fall,
Or check them out online at the Global Base. That's DA Global BASE. Thank you to the Global Base.
what is right. Let it be for justice.
I want to say thank you to McNeil Trucking.
Let it be for justice. No matter.
With McNeil Trucking, your goods are in good hands.
Let it be.
They're a veteran-owned, licensed and insured mover in the state of Florida.
Disparities and violence.
So if you want to move from the Keys to Jacksonville,
Racism, no, I won't.
want to move from
No,
Naples over to Pompano Beach, from Palm Beach to Pensacola,
Marcus Garvey said it.
think of a point in between. You want to put some things in storage, you don't have the manpower, you don't have the transportation, don't worry. You have the name, you have the number. McNeil Trucking, 954-406-9740. That's 954-406-9740.
What is right.
Call them up today.
Let it be for justice. Let.
Tell them Kevin Stew sent you.
No matter what it costs, let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. Let it be.
Hey, it's just less.
Let it be for justice.
Big ups to those who are locked in on YouTube live.
For justice. Let it be for justice. We the people are from royalty. Royalty. I wish so many of us can see. Keep the culture, be united, stop the violence. Put the power in ourselves, create the franchise. And
You can only use your left hand. What's going on?
I'm so sick of these murders in the streets. Ooh, why I?
Numbers to call, numbers to text. The phone line is always open. It's scrolling across the bottom of your screen. Those of you who are watching, 773-789-STEW. That's 773-789-7839. You can call, you can text, you can WhatsApp from anywhere in the world. Gets you in touch right here, live and in living color. Hello, nurse.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for justice. No matter.
Thank you for checking in.
Be for justice. Let it be for justice. Why not? Let it be for justice.
Once again, the son of China Nicole.
Let it be for justice. Let it be for.
That's the title of the track. Let it be for justice.
Let it be for justice.
Now, I had asked a question earlier, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with this case. And it's the case of the murder of Stacey Stites. Now, here you had a 19-year-old girl. 19-year-old young woman who lived and worked in Texas. She was in, where is she from? She worked in at the HEB in Bastrop, but lived in the neighboring county. And so going back and forth to Bastrop, easy thing, regular thing. She would go to work early in the morning. It's kind of, HEB is for those of you who are South Floridians. We don't have HEB down here, but it's to my understanding, it's kind of a Walmart type of store. And so she worked in the grocery department, and she would go to work very early in the morning. Now, this one particular morning, she was on her way to work and she never made it. The pickup truck that she drove was found in a school parking lot. And it was found by one of the officers who was the first on the scene, was Ed Salmela. He documented some of his findings from looking around the scene and looking into the truck. And there's controversy as it relates to that, because there are his handwritten notes and there is a typed report that wasn't done by him. So there's some controversy there. But it goes on, and the case went on with a lot of back and forth, because the victim in question here, she was engaged to a Bastrop police officer, and his name is Jimmy Fennell. I say is because he's still around. And Jimmy was, I don't know if he still is, was a guy with a very short temper. He was said to be racist. I don't know the guy. But it's along the lines of things that were said about him. So, and I'm trying to not confuse the issue and put too much out there all at once, because everything kind of mixes in together into this stew, if you will, of questions. There's a question of what really happened to Stacy, because the truck that she was driving was found in a school parking lot that was close to where the family of Rodney Reed lives. And Rodney became the prime suspect in this case and was later convicted of her murder, rape and murder. Needless to say, there's controversy around that. Why do I say there's controversy around that? Well, when there's controversy about Rodney being in the truck, because there are questions of his DNA in the truck. There are questions of his relationship with Stacy. There are some that say Rodney and Stacy knew each other. There's a report that came out from the police because they questioned him to say where he said he didn't know Stacy. Well, here's the thing. Everything within context, right? Here is a black man being questioned by white police officers back in the mid-90s in Texas. Now, one might say, what does the color of skin have to do with anything? Well, even today, skin color plays a role in how a lot of people treat each other. And that's just the reality of the situation. Now, if you close your eyes and you talk to someone, you can't tell how different they are other than the tone of their voice and accent that they may have. You don't know what they look like. And so there are people who have made assumptions and jumped to conclusions about people just because of their appearance. I digress, though. So here it is. You have a black man being questioned by police about the death of a white woman. Now, Rodney wasn't a stranger to this. He had been accused of rape a few times. And so you would probably think, well, what would make him not be the prime suspect? Well, there are a few things that also come into play here. And if you've been listening to this broadcast for a while now, from 2019, from November of 2019 to be specific, you would have heard different bits of information being presented as it relates to the relationship with Stacy and Rodney, the relationship between Stacy and Rodney, including one of Stacy's cousins, who initially, when she found out about Stacy's death, was really angry. And to the point where when she heard that someone was arrested, she was like, okay, so what are we waiting for? Let's get that electric chair powered up. Until she started asking questions. And things didn't quite add up. So now she is one of the black sheep in the family, because her cousins and her aunt have kind of shunned her for taking a position of not believing that Rodney Reed was her killer. What does that have to do with Ed Salmela, you may ask? Well, one of the things is that Ed, like I said, was one of the initial officers to find the truck that Stacy drove. Didn't know that it was related to a murder at the time, just documenting what he was finding because it was in a school parking lot and was kind of suspicious. He mentioned some things being inside the truck in his initial report, and he mentioned some bags of clothes in a dumpster. What's the big deal there? Well, one of the things that investigators tend to look for, and I didn't even think about this until David Fisher and I were in dialogue. And he said, having been an investigator for the Postal Service, there are certain things that you pick up along the way. And as you talk with other investigators and learn little tricks and tips of investigation, he said, clothes in a dumpster, even at a school, good clothes, would send up a flag because it would indicate someone is trying to run away. And that was, for him, a flag that something was up. And I don't know if this was the kind of thinking that Ed Salmela had in his head, that, maybe this is important information. But here it was. Now, the truck was locked up, and a couple of hours, I guess, would have passed by, and he would get a call over the radio about a body being found in Bastrop and being local police, investigation. Anyway, it turns out that the body that was found and the pickup truck were linked because that was the truck that Stacey Stites was driving when she left home. Truck registered to her fiancé, Jimmy Fennell. And so you see the pieces starting to show up and come together. No, not yet. You will. And if not, if you don't, then you can just check back through the archives at the many broadcasts that have been done presenting information relating to Rodney Reed. When you visit the YouTube archive, you can just search for Kevin Stew, Rodney Reed, and you'll see a number of things coming up. I mentioned Rodney Reed's accusations of rape because there was one particular accusation that was used to help to convict him, and it was the accusation of him raping a 12-year-old girl. At the time, this 12-year-old girl had a close friend who was a little bit older, about 16 at the time. Her name is Joie Monfort. And Joy has been in this broadcast, and she talks about talking with her friend after this incident. And she went into detail on this broadcast explaining how it went down as she talked to her friend about this rape. And she asked her friend if she knew who her rapist was. She said to her that she did. And she gave her a name. And the name was not... Joy gave her friend a name because she wasn't very vocal. The name that she gave was not Rodney Reed. And the response was that of an affirmative. Now, did it play out that way? No, it didn't. Police officers involved operated under questionable circumstances or questionable methods. And so it ended up becoming a web of confusion in the midst of pointing fingers and creating a story. And the story that was being created made Rodney look very guilty. Hey, Joy. Speak of the angel and she appears. Uh, hey, Joy. Joy locking in, checking in on Facebook Live. I just called your name. If you want to give us a quick call on the ring-a-ling, give us a quick ding-a-ling on the ring-a-ling on the ding-a-ling. Yeah. You know the number. As we wait for Lee to come join us. So, as you know, people might not believe me when I tell the story, but like I said, it's documented. So here it was. Ed did his little findings, jotted it down in his handy dandy notebook, as any good investigating officer would do. In the midst of all of this, there's back and forth investigations happening and thing. And Ed has a personal life. And things weren't going so great in his personal life, and some things went down leading to him leaving the police force. One of them being an accusation from an ex that he made terroristic threats towards her. In his departure from the police force, he handed in his Colt 45, I believe it was. Anyway, the weapon, this what it boils down to is that the weapon that was used in his death was the weapon that he turned in to the police department. And so that in and of itself raised questions. How is it that the weapon that is handed in ended up being the weapon that is used in his death? And, well, the only response I got to that question is, well, he got it somehow. Somehow. I don't quite know how somehow is the way that someone would get something like a weapon handed in to the police department. I don't know. Joy, are you there?
I'm here. How are
Hey,
you?
hey, Joy. I am
It's been a
well.
minute.
It has been a minute. I feel like I need to tell you Happy New Year or something.
I know, right? It has been a while. I've been working relentlessly, many hours, and so I've not been able to catch the show or anything because when I'm home, I'm asleep, and when I'm awake, I'm at work. So,
I know. It is delayed as a result of just that, things going crazy at work.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
Real quickly, I
sure.
mentioned I mentioned your involvement in this whole thing, and on Facebook Live, you commented that Ed was a good man.
Yes, he was.
Tell
He
us
was a
what
very
you
good
know
man.
about Ed.
When I was 15 years old, it was right before my 16th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Me and two of my girlfriends decided that we were grown and we could do what we want. And we got in a car with someone we shouldn't have gotten in a car with.
Yes.
And we realized about 10 minutes into the ride that things weren't right. And we were on Highway 71 heading towards Austin. And the person turned and took a back road. It would take you the I want to say it was 969 that takes you up into North Austin, but it takes you down out into a rural area.
Mm-hmm.
There was a stoplight, and the only thing I could say was God was on our side because that light only turns red when cross traffic stops at the other light.
Mm-hmm.
There was no cross traffic, but that light turned red. And when that light turned red, we opened the door and we shoved Jennifer out because she was closest to the door. Heather jumped out behind her, and I jumped out behind Heather. Well, at that point, the light turned green. The guy took off, and there was a Circle K right there. And we ran over to the Circle K, and we called the police, and Travis County came out and picked us up. Now, in these instances, a county Mountie should have come and picked us up. A Bastrop County car should have met the Travis County car at the county line.
Mm-hmm.
But because Ed found out that I was with the other two girls, Ed said, "No, I will go get them. I know her. I know her dad. I will go get them." And he and a female officer came to the county line and picked us up. Now, he didn't have to do that. He did not have to go out of his way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I know the minute I saw his face, I knew we were safe. I knew that everything was going to be okay. Ed was a genuine guy. I don't have anything bad to say about Ed. Yeah, he used to give me a hard time, but I was a hard-headed teenager. I
Right.
deserved it, you know. But he was just a good person all around. And when he was working down at the little store down by my daddy's house, I'd go in there, and he knew I had my puppy in my pocket. I had a little tiny puppy, small enough to fit him in the pocket of my shorts, and I would slip that puppy in my pocket and pull my shirt down over the top of the puppy. He knew I had that puppy, but he would never say a word. And nobody else could bring their dogs in. But as long as that dog was in my pocket, he would never say a word to me. Now, if it started making noise, he'd tell me, "Now you can get that dog out of here. You know better than that." And then
Right.
he'd wink at me, like, "I knew you had it in there. You should have kept it quiet." But, he was just genuine. You
Yeah.
don't meet people like that anymore. You just don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
So he was. I didn't know. I didn't know Ed had passed, and he was supposed to. He was supposed to come and talk to me. I want to say it was a Saturday. I saw him on Saturday. He was supposed to come see me on Sunday, something like that. He wanted to talk to me, but he didn't want to talk to me there in town.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay. And he was supposed to meet me at the barbecue place in Kyle, Railroad Barbecue, right there by the railroad tracks. Just as you're going into Kyle. I don't know if it's still there or not. I haven't been home in 20 years. But he was supposed to meet me there, and he never showed up.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the heck? Why would he do that? Why would he tell me to meet him somewhere and then not show up? Apparently whatever it was he wanted to talk to me about was pretty damn important for him to say he wanted to come to my town where I was living to talk to me. And it was probably about 2 weeks later, I went back to Bastrop to go check on my dad, who was living there at the time. And I had stopped by my ex-in-law's house, and that's when I found out that he had passed away. And I went, wait, what? No, that can't be. And then they told me the story that everybody else had heard, that he had taken his own life. And the minute that was said to me, I called BS.
Why?
And because he wasn't a coward. And I mean, I know that may sound harsh to some people, but he wasn't one to take the easy way out of anything. That just was not him. From what I have always known about this man, it did not matter what was coming at him. he would always hit it dead on. He would, I mean, just head first, he would go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he knew that it was not the best thing for him, if he knew it was the right thing to do, that's what he would have done. And I mean, there weren't very many police officers in Bastrop at that time like that. I mean, we had some pretty sleazy officers. I mean, if you go down the list of the officers that were there and were active duty at that time,
Yes.
and look to see how many are still active duty today, not a single one of them. And
Well,
they
it's
lost their.
been a long time.
It doesn't matter. They were not officers way before that, and they lost their right to be an officer of the law under shady circumstances. I mean, one of them was able to keep his job and sit at a desk until he was at retirement, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to keep his pension. But I'm sorry, if I got pulled over
Mm-hmm.
for a DWI, and I tell the officer I'm an officer, and I tell the other officer, hey, we're on the same team. Can you just overlook this one? I'm gonna go to jail, just like that person went to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of losing his job, then they let him sit at a desk until he retired, and so he could keep his pension. The other one, the other shady officer,
Mm-hmm.
ended up what was he, a sheriff. He ended up being the sheriff, and then lost his position for embezzlement, I believe. So I mean, come on. There was shady stuff going on. I can't say that Ed was never did anything shady or anything like that, but I can tell you that I know I never saw anything.
Mm.
He would give me a hard time, but he never harassed me like some of the other officers. And I'm talking, when I say harass me, I mean they would follow me through town on my bumper. And if it was at night, they would turn that bright light on my back window
Mm-hmm.
until I would pull over. They wouldn't turn the red and blue, just the really bright one. Like they were trying to blind me. One of them, the one that got to stay until he reached pension time,
Yes.
he was the worst. It would pull me over just to make sure I had a license. Bro, you just pulled me over a week ago. I didn't lose my license in a week.
Now, with that paints a picture of the Bastrop PD at the time,
Mm-hmm.
where
Yep.
when Ed died, based on the story that I got of his death,
Mm-hmm.
he had certain things planned out and things planned to do.
Mm-hmm.
One of them being taking dropping off dry cleaning. One of
Yeah.
them
Oh,
being
you know what? Before you go any further, he was going to Louisiana, and he told me he would meet me when he got back. That was the whole reason he was meeting me the day that he was meeting me.
he told you he was going to Louisiana
Mm-hmm.
and would talk with you when he got back. What kind of mood was he in? Did he seem like
He just seemed
he
like
was depressed?
normal. No, he just seemed normal. He's like, hey, I gotta talk to you about something. I'm like, hey, I don't live here anymore. I don't care. And he goes, no, for real. And I was like, okay, well, what do you talk to me about? He goes, no, not here. He goes, you're living out in Kyle still, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, I'll come there and talk to you. And I'm like, dude, you ain't coming to my house. That's just shady. And he started laughing. I mean, I was just being cheeky with him, right?
Right.
And And no, he goes, it's just, I just want to talk to you about something. And I was like, okay. I'm like, oh, did I do something wrong? And he goes, no, 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 you didn't do anything wrong. He goes, I just want to talk to you about something. He goes, now leave it alone. And I'm like, yes, sir. I wasn't going to argue with him. I'm just like, okay. But I think it was because he had something he wanted to tell me, and he knew my relationship with the Reed family.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I still wonder. I still wonder every day what it was that he wanted to talk to me about. I was the only one that was no longer living in that town. Everyone else was still living in that town, or in that town more than they should be. And
Mm.
I showed up once in a blue moon, and it was usually just to go check on my dad, um, because my dad was living by himself at the time. So I would go every now and then, and I would check to make sure he had food or whatever. And Ed knew that. So Ed knew when I was coming into town, I was going over to Ray's bar,
Mm-hmm.
because my dad lived right behind Ray's bar. Um, and I'd go and I'd stop and I'd check on him, make sure he had food and stuff that he needed or whatever. I'd hang out with my dad for a couple of hours. I'd stop in and see my other mom and dad, because I divorced the man. I didn't divorce the family.
Right. Right.
And then I would head back home.
Yeah.
I never stayed the night,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he knew that. So, um, but I can't help but wonder if he wanted to come and talk to me about the situation. That burns in my mind all the time. What did he want to talk to me about? What did he want to tell me that was so important that he could not tell me there in Bastrop? Because he just didn't trust anybody. I mean, he never said that,
Yeah.
but that was the feeling I got. Was that he just didn't trust anybody in his surroundings, and he just didn't want to talk there.
Now, Sisless on YouTube Live commented and said, as we were talking about some of the shady police officers
Mm-hmm.
in Bastrop, she mentions the name David Board.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah,
remember.
he got to keep his job.
Oh,
Ivan Drunk, he got to keep his job till his pension.
and this
I
is
just did
the
the
officer
same
you were
thing.
talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when when Ed got when Ed passed,
Mm-hmm.
there was an officer that became the lead investigating officer in this case.
Mm-hmm.
His alleged suicide. Who was that
Mm-hmm.
officer? Do you know?
Richard Hernandez, I believe it was. I know he was part of it, and then there was um, um, Rocky
Wardlow.
Wardlow. But he wasn't a Bastrop PD.
Hmm.
He was I want to say he was a marshal or a ranger.
He was a Texas Ranger.
Yeah, he was a ranger. Um, so there was Rocky Wardlow. There was Richard Hernandez. I don't I don't know which one actually took the lead on it. I know Rocky Wardlow was the head of it all.
Mm-hmm.
He was the snake's head.
The
Um,
snake's head.
yeah, he was the snake's head
Why would you refer to him as that? He was that
because
sleazy?
because they were all full of venom
Mm.
and hate. And the sad part about it is no matter how many mistakes Bastrop made in this whole investigation, no matter how many things that they looked at that they did not take an account for, no matter what, no matter how many times you point it out to them, they will never admit they were wrong and did the wrong thing. Never. Never.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry. Yeah, don't take this wrong. Please don't take this wrong in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
Rodney's a smart man, but Rodney would not have known to cut somebody's fingernails.
Mm.
Rodney would not have. Please tell me how in the hell you can wipe down a truck on the inside of just your own fingerprints and leave everybody else's. Please tell me, how does that work?
And I chuckle because that was my question when I first heard about that. Now, for those that are listening in and don't know what we're talking about here, as the investigation went on into the truck, the report was that they weren't able to find Rodney Reed's fingerprints in the truck because he wiped them down. He wiped down the truck. He wiped them off.
But yet they picked up Stacy's and they picked up Jimmy's.
Right. And the only thing that they used to say that Rodney was in this vehicle was that the seat was pushed back like someone taller would be driving it. And Rodney is a tall guy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is pretty much the only thing. And they said his DNA on a back brace that Stacy wore. Now, this is the other part of it. Isis, I know what you say, but he messaged me, Isis, in his defense, and until he ends up being a no-show, I will not call him a no-show. Isis says Lee is pulling a Scott. See, I had tried twice to speak with Scott Salmela, and twice ended up doing a show without him, doing a broadcast without him. But I've been in communication with Lee, and he said he has been tied up for at least, well, at the time, at the beginning of the broadcast, he said an hour. So we'll see. We'll see.
I know right now, I mean, I'm up at 2 a.m. I'm at work by 4 a.m. I get home between 3:30 and 4 p.m. Have enough time to do homework with my daughter, cook dinner, and then I go back to bed.
Yeah, I know. So I know this is extra time that you're putting in right now, and I appreciate of it.
Well, when I saw that you were doing a show on Ed, and I needed to be a part of it because not necessarily on the phone. I wasn't expecting you to be on the phone, but anything from a brother though, I'll call.
Yeah. Thank you.
But you know, I want people to understand that Ed quit. Ed quit. He resigned.
Mm-hmm.
When you resign, you hand in two things.
Your badge and your gun.
Badge and you hand in your gun. Please tell me how the gun that he had just handed in is the same gun he used to take his own life. How does that work?
Right.
He didn't get it back. It wasn't his. It was issued. It was his issued firearm. You don't get to keep those, especially if you resign.
No.
And what could make a man who was damn good at his job and cared about the community that he worked in one day just up and say, I don't want to do this anymore?
Round about the same time that he's telling you that there's something that he wants to talk with you about.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
so how does that work?
Another bit of information here is his neighbor. Shortly before the whole alleged suicide happened, he talked with his neighbor on his way into his unit. Went into his unit. The neighbor heard a gunshot and came running to see what was going on. And his door was locked. Went to go call the cops. When he came back, the door wasn't locked anymore and there was a cop inside. Now, based on the report that I got,
What cop was that?
that cop was Rocky Wardlow.
His roommate? Oh, did I let the cat out of the bag?
And there goes that cat scampering down the road, chasing I don't know what.
Uh-huh. See, Rocky Wardlow left out the fact that he was Ed's roommate at that time.
What, 6 to 8 months prior? He was his roommate?
Well, no, it wasn't 6 to 8 months prior. He had just moved out a few weeks prior.
It was weeks?
Yeah, it was just a few weeks. It wasn't months, it was weeks. If I'm not mistaken, it was just a few weeks. It wasn't a few months. But he had been Ed's roommate, and he managed to leave that out of anything. That he had ever had a key to that apartment, that he had ever lived in that apartment. He didn't tell any of that. Someone else told it.
But it gets better. It gets even better. Because
What was the question?
wait 1 second. I'm gonna get into where it gets a little bit better. Carol, how you doing, sis? Good to see you popping in. Hey, cuz. I want to say big up to my cousin out to Jamaica, Sharon. Much love. Those of you on Facebook Live, this is where we're going to part company with you guys. Come on over to the website, kevinstew.com, for the remainder of this broadcast. You got extended time tonight. It was just a segment broadcast, but you got a little bit of extra time tonight. So just come on over to kevinstew.com for the remainder of the broadcast. I'm going to chat a little bit more with Joy before she has to go off to get some sleep, some much-deserved rest. She works hard. She does. And so come on over for the remainder of the broadcast. Those of you listening in on your various platforms across the globe, thank you very much. Stick and stay right where you are. It continues up until midnight Eastern. All right, so here it is. Ed, he was killed with a gun that he turned in along with his resignation. The other part is, and it shows on the autopsy, which anybody can look it up and find, the point of entry of the bullet wound is on the left side of his head.
How is that? How can that be?
Why would you ask that question, though?
Because he couldn't shoot a gun with that hand.
You knew this personally?
Yeah.
What do you know about Ed and his left hand?
It shook. When he would hold anything heavy in that hand, it shook.
So
tell me how that happened.
Basically, his left hand was only there for show.
No, he could use it. He could use it.
But not to fire a gun.
But not to fire a gun. No way. Because anytime I remember we were out. My dad had taken me way out on Piney Ridge, in this one area, and we used to call it the circles. And what it was at the time, it was 2 little paved areas that were like cul-de-sacs.
Yes.
And it was supposed to be a housing development that was going to go in there, but it never went up. It might be there now, but it wasn't at the time. And my dad would take me out in that area to shoot, to teach me how to shoot. And I remember Ed had come out there because he had gotten a report of gunfire. So he came out to check it out, and I put gun on the ground, And my dad said, just put the gun down on the ground and walk this way. So I put the gun down on the ground and I walked, towards him and Ed. And he was talking to Ed, telling Ed, and I just brought her out here, teach her how to, you know, aim and maybe get her aim a little bit better.
Right.
And um, so Ed had walked over to, kind of met me, and he goes, "Come here, let me show you something." And he picked the gun up. He had it in his right hand, and he put his hand forward, and he was showing me kind of like the best way to line sights
Mm-hmm.
when you didn't have anything to line your sights with other than the tip of the barrel, right?
Right.
And I remember him putting the gun in. He moved the gun over to his other hand, and he was pointing with his finger at the same time. His other hand, he was pointing with his finger. And he goes, "Point your finger like this." And so I was pointing my finger like he was showing me. And he goes, "Now imagine the tip of your finger is pointing directly at what you're wanting to shoot." He says, when you pull the trigger, he says there's always going to be some type of recoil. Me, being young me, was recoil. So
Mm-hmm.
he explained to me what it was. He shifted the gun back into his other hand. I said, "Why didn't you just shoot it with that hand?" And he goes, "I can't." And so he put my 22 pistol in his hand and pulled his hand up to take aim, and his hand began to shake. He
Mm.
says, I cannot hold the gun steady in that hand. He says, I can hold the gun steady in this hand, and I can use my left hand as support, but I cannot. I don't shoot with this hand. I shoot with my right hand. So tell me again how he was able to shoot himself in the left temple.
Now, I'm no expert, but I would think if one is trying to commit suicide using a gun to the head, they'd want to make sure that they did it right.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would go with what they're sure of.
Right. And this is statistically speaking. You can look this up
Mm-hmm.
on any anything talking about men and suicides with guns.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, most men put the barrel in the mouth. They don't put it to the temple.
I didn't know that. That was one bit of research I have not done.
Do that research. You'd find it's amazing what you'll find out. Just, and I'm talking male. Period.
Mm.
Um, Males, no matter the age, have a habit of rather than to the side of the head, it's usually in the mouth or to the face.
Hmm.
Which blew me away. I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't think I could know, because women, and the reason I looked this up is because they said that this woman had shot herself in the head, and I was like, no, that's not that. No, that's just no. And so I started looking up statistics, and women are more inclined to overdose or cut their wrist,
Mm.
whereas men are more inclined to use guns, ropes, or jumping from something.
Right. Bridge, building. Yeah.
Hmm. It was just it was a rabbit hole I fell in and just kept reading.
You know, I asked you that because I spoke with Scott and he told me himself that his brother could do nothing really with his left hand for that very same reason you told me.
He could
It
write,
shook.
yeah, but he could write. He could put a pen in that hand, and it was sloppy, but
Yeah.
he could write. But that was about it.
And so that part of it was the part that made it even more questionable. Because here you had a man committing suicide, putting a gun to his temple on the side that is his non-dominant side, using a gun that he turned into the police department, and the police officer that is standing inside this unit that he lived in used to be his roommate, who then took charge of the investigation. Needless to say, there were no gunshot residue testing. There was no GSR test that was done.
No, because he would have had to go all the way back to his house to get, his kit.
He had a kit in his car.
Not according to him.
Okay, even so, the police department was closer than his house.
Thank you. And police cars showed up. And a police car would have a GSR residue kit.
Here it is, a gunshot-related death. Said to be suicide. No GSR testing done. So, questions on top of questions tend to come out. And you lived there, you knew people from there.
And nobody wants to answer those questions. Nobody wants to, in fact, yes. You get treated as if you are dumb for even asking those questions or raising those questions. You get treated as though you're the dumb one.
Right.
If there is anything in my life that I know how to do and I know how to do well, that's ask questions. I am a quality engineering technician.
Yes.
It is my job to ensure that anything that goes out to manufacturing is to the top of the quality spectrum.
Right.
So when it's not, it is my job to ask questions. It is my job to get to the root cause. I ask the 5 whys. I will do the Pareto chart. I will narrow things down. It is my job to do that. It is my job to do the research. Do you think that I've been sitting back all these years just idle, waiting for somebody to call me to ask me questions about this whole situation? No. And so when people start, spouting at me on Twitter and Facebook and wherever else they decide, to say horrible things to me or about me, I just let it ride. Because, see, here's the difference. These are people that are sitting at a keyboard that have never, ever lived in Bastrop, Texas.
Right.
So I let them think they know what they're talking about. I learned, I'll be 50 years old in July. And I have learned over these 50 years, you don't argue with stupid people. If they come at you with 2 + 2 is 5, you say,
yes,
dang, you got to carry that one. You're right. And you walk away, because that saves you the turmoil of trying to convince somebody who is thoroughly convinced that they know what they're talking about because they've read the paperwork, that they're wrong. So rather than add stress to you yourself that way, you just agree with them. Yep, you're right. Because you got to carry that one, and that's how you get the 5, and I got to go.
Right.
Have a good day.
Keep it moving. Now, this isn't the first time that you've asked questions relating to something in your hometown area.
No.
And
it isn't.
You were younger when you were asking other questions. And I told a little bit of that story with the rape accusation relating to Rodney. And this is why I bring these other things up, ladies and gentlemen. I bring them up because some of the same players are involved in all these situations.
Yep.
Some of the same investigating officers. Yes.
It's the same players in both these investigations.
And when you say both, you're talking about Rodney, Stacy's death and Ed's death.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they're the very same players, that even leads to more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Because could it be that Ed wasn't comfortable with something and decided, like you said, you had the thought,
Mm-hmm.
what was up with this? Is this some relating to something that he wanted to talk with me about?
Yeah. I
Because he
mean,
had a date in Louisiana. He had made a date with a woman in Louisiana
mhm.
to go to the casino.
Why would he have not gone?
Right.
What would be a reason for him to not go?
He suddenly became so depressed. And this is after taking money out of the ATM also.
Mm-hmm.
So he suddenly got so depressed that he had to commit suicide.
Do you know when I went to do the interview with 2020, the whole portion of me that they cut
That they
out of
cut
that,
out. Yes.
they cut out anything. I found that they cut out anything positive. That spoke positive of Rodney or would create doubt in any way, shape, or form. They cut all of that out. When I went there, I told them flat out, I'll come, I'll do the interview if you can get me in and out of there within 24 hours. Then I went to my local police department and I told them, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing. I should be back by this time, this particular night. If I'm not, these are the people you look at. And they said, why are you telling us this? I said, because this is the next Texas Ranger, this is the next chief of police, and this is the next sheriff. And they went, what? And I was like, I don't trust any of them. I don't trust any of them. Not as much as I could pick you up and throw you across this room. I mean, I'm a tough little 5-foot round woman, but I'm not that tough. And one of the officers that I sat and spoke with, he says, what makes you so afraid? And I'm like, because anyone that has spoken out against these people have met their demise. I said, so if anything happens to me and I do not make it home for any reason whatsoever, I said, and my husband will be contacting you if I don't. These are the people that are to be looked at.
And we're talking about Rocky Wardlow, David Board, and who?
Richard Hernandez. Richard Hernandez hated me since I was 16 years old because my boyfriend at the time was Ron. Ron and I were walking to the movie theater. We were walking up Chestnut, I believe is the name of the road, towards the old movie theater that sat right there on the corner. And he pulls up in front of us. We were just passing the courthouse. So he pulls up in front of us and stops us. And we're on foot. And he pushes himself between me and Ron and wants Ron's identification. And Ron looking at me, and I was like, what does he got to give you his ID for? We're just walking to the movie theater. We're coming from the house, walking to the movie theater. What do you want? And Ron's telling me to be quiet. Shh, be quiet. I got this. Shh. I didn't understand. I didn't understand what the big deal was. I'm white. I'm a female. I don't understand. I'm 16. I really didn't understand. And so Ron kept telling me to be quiet, that he'd handle it. So he hands Richard his identification. Doesn't call his ID in. Doesn't call his name in. Doesn't do anything other than look at his ID, go, oh, okay, and hands it back to him. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
As we're walking back towards the theater, they had just installed a regular red, green, yellow light. It was no longer the flashing stoplight at that intersection anymore.
Yes.
And he got stopped at the red light. Well, I could hear him laughing. So I walked over to the car. He didn't see me. But I heard him tell the woman that was in the car, because she was laughing too. Frickin' heifer.
Mm.
Both of them. Did you see the look on his face? I know. He was so scared. I said, excuse me. Can I please have your badge number? And he goes, I said, your name and badge number, please. And so he goes, yeah. And he gave me his name, Richard Hernandez, and his badge number. I don't remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, thank you. And I walked back and I met up with Ron, and Ron's like, you crazy, you crazy. I was like, no. I said, you know what? I said, sometimes being a little crazy is okay. I said, and trust me, you haven't seen crazy yet.
Now, you mentioned Ron, you mentioned Richard Hernandez stepping in between the two of you and giving Ron a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, what makes that so significant?
Ron was black. And I'm white. And that was frowned upon. Even in the late 80s, that was frowned upon.
Mm.
David Board flat out told me, your daddy should have taken you out back and beat the end lever out of you. That's what he should have done.
David Board told you that?
Yeah, I was 18 years old.
An officer of the law?
Yeah. I was 18 years old. It was one of the many, many times that he decided to pull me over. And that happened right in front of Big Long's IGA, right there in the middle of town on Main Street.
That was the other thing. A lot of people probably don't realize how much of a close-knit town the town of Bastrop was. Being that it was a small town.
I could not do anything on the north end of town without my parents knowing about it on the south end of town before I got home. And it didn't even have to be the person's house that I did it at that called and told my daddy.
Mm-hmm.
It could have just been somebody passing by that saw it and got home and decided to call. Or they would go and they would drive by Ron's mom and daddy's house and stop and tell Ron's mom and dad, hey, I saw her on the north end of town with so-and-so, and you might want to check into that and see why she's hanging out with that person. That person's no good. You know, I mean, you could not do anything as a teenager. You could not do anything in Bastrop without the whole town knowing about it. You couldn't. I mean, it was one of those things. You know, telephone, telegraph, telebastropian.
Mm. Which is,
I mean,
you know, sorry to cut you, but this is what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to information surrounding these crimes. The death of Stacey Stites, the rape of Angela Hamby, Linda Schluter telling her stories.
Oh my God.
And Isisless just commented and said Melissa Lucio and Darley Routier also had some of the same players that you mentioned, the David Board, the Richard Hernandez, the Rocky Wardlow, in their convictions.
Imagine that.
And so, and this is just from the law enforcement side of it. Because from research and records requests that David Fisher has presented on this broadcast. We see where it goes higher up to the black robe and gavel.
Yep.
So when
That's right. Good old boy town. And if you didn't fit in that good old boy,
network, it was a
yeah,
problem.
there was a big problem. There was a huge problem. Everybody knew the junkyard in the middle of town, right across the street from Little Long's, was owned by Clyde Clardy.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in that town knew that there were certain nights that Clyde Clardy shut his junkyard down early, but people were going in
Mm.
and going in and going in. And I asked one day, I asked Ron's dad, I said, Daddy, I said, what goes on over at Clyde Clardy's at night after he closes the junkyard down? He goes, shut up, girl, you don't need to be asking them questions. I said, but I see people going in. And he goes, no, you don't.
Mm.
And that's when I found out that there were certain types of meetings being held there. My dad was the one that actually ended up telling me, and I confirmed it by asking other people, are they having KKK meetings there? And it was finally confirmed by numerous people that, yeah, that's what was going on. But everybody turned a blind eye. This is the late 80s.
Mm.
And people were still turning a blind eye to that. Don't tell me that things changed all of a sudden, because no, it didn't. Things in little podunk towns like that did not change all of a sudden. There were too many old timers there that were stuck in their ways and could not see the forest for the trees.
Right.
They were too busy focusing on that little tiny spot rather than taking a step back and looking at the big picture. And what is so terrible about that whole situation is it didn't change. Mid-90s, it still hadn't changed. Pushing the 2000s, it still hadn't changed. But if you listen to these keyboard warriors out here, they
Yes.
think they know it all, and that, oh, it couldn't have been like that. It couldn't have been that bad. It couldn't have been. Did you live there? No, you didn't. I did. And I know that when my ex-husband and I walked into a restaurant and sat down to eat, and I had this old, putrid, overweight, overall wearing man move his seat so he could stare at me while I was eating my lunch, and he's sipping on his coffee, staring at me over the brim of his coffee cup. I looked at him. I have no shame. I looked right at him and I went, are you hungry, baby? You want a bite of my salad? I'll give you some. I said, tell the waitress to bring me a plate. I'll give you half my salad. I don't want nothing you got. And I was like, well, I don't want nothing you got either, but you staring at me awfully hard like you're hungry, and all you can afford is that coffee.
Ooh.
And the whole time, my husband is kicking me under the damn table. And I'm like, knock it off. I got this. But those were the little things. This is the 80s, the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I married Ron in 1991. 3 days after my 18th birthday. And things were still that way because of the old people that lived there that didn't want to change their ways.
And so if you had any relations with someone who was not a part of the club, you'd end up being ostracized and targeted.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this could have been what had happened to Ed.
Absolutely. He didn't fit in the club anymore. One thing Ed wouldn't do, he wouldn't lie for somebody. He just would. He would not lie for somebody. And if he felt like he was lying for somebody, he'd walk away from the situation. He would not. He wouldn't make it be known that that was the reason.
Yes.
But you could put it all together and figure out why he walked away from the situation. Because something was happening that was not right, that did not set right with him, and he would walk away. Like it never happened, but he would walk away because he didn't want to be any part of that. That is what I remember about Ed. When things just wasn't right, did not set well with him, he would walk away and pretend like it did not exist. Now, whether doing it that way was the right way or not, that was Ed's way. And we all respected him for that. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Ed called me over to the car one night. He was he was sitting directly across the street from the movie theater. And he saw me out there hugging on Ron.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron went back inside the theater. And he called me over to the car. And I, being the person I was, I went over to see what he wanted. And he says, "Does your daddy know about that boy?" I said, "No, sir." "You gonna tell your daddy about that boy?" I said, "Eventually."
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Where's your daddy at now?" I said, "He's in Detroit right now. He's working a job in Detroit. He'll be home in a couple of weeks." "Hmm. Well, when your daddy gets home, I'm gonna give you 2 days. If you don't tell your daddy about that boy within the 2 days after he gets home," he goes, "I'm gonna tell him." "Yes, sir."
Mm.
And so I told my dad. My dad threw me out.
Mm.
Now, the one thing that I can honestly say is that my dad rethought the situation, and my sister Lisa, who was married to Bobby Charles Sosa, told my dad, "Now, how is it that you can accept Bobby Charles, who is Mexican, but you can't accept Ron because he's black?" And my dad thought about it. My dad accepted Ron.
Mm.
To know Ron, he got to know Ron's family. My dad became a completely different person. Um, James Haywood, Reverend James Haywood, James Haywood will tell you to this day, Dennis was my friend. He was my brother. He was my friend. And that was my dad,
Mm.
you know. So a, a lot changed inside of my dad when Ron and I became an item, and I was open and told him.
Yes.
He let me come home. Not for long. I didn't get along very well with my stepmother.
Mm.
So I ended up getting booted again because of her, but that's another story. But my dad would come down to Ron's parents' house and sit and talk with my other daddy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they would sit and they would BS and they would talk and it was like they were old friends and known each other all their lives. Um, he became a completely different person, um, and I can't help but think that it was because of my relationship with the Moore family and with the Reed family that did that helped push that change in my dad.
Do you think the rest
Uh,
of the tone changed also?
I'm sorry.
Do you think the rest of the tone changed also?
Um, they became the people that saw us after they got to know us accepted us.
Mm-hmm.
But Ron and I were one of the first interracial couples that would go out publicly together and did not care. I did not care.
Little
And
rebel that you've always been.
well, because I showed that I don't care what you think. I think for myself. I'm not going to think like you think just because you think that that's the right way for me to think.
Right.
Um, I've always been very independent. I've always been very boisterous. I don't bite my tongue. If I think it, I'm most likely going to say it. Doesn't always work out well for me, but that's just who I am. And there were many times where um, I would end up, we'd be out doing something. I sang with the Heavenly Sunlights. And I mean, I'm sitting in a van, all black people in the van except for me. But never did I feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
never feel unwanted, never did I feel out of place. Um, because they wouldn't let me feel that way, for one. I was family, and they treated me as such.
Right.
And so because of that, I think because of the fact that I wasn't ashamed, there was no reason for me to be.
Mm-hmm.
That people started to take a different look at the fact that, well, here's this white girl with this black man, and they seem really happy, and they laugh and they talk and they, wow, they're like a normal people. Like, I mean, it's like it was almost like what did they expect? I sometimes want to go back and ask those questions. What did you expect? What were you expecting when you saw us together? What did you expect to see? What did you expect to hear? What did you expect? Because what they expected and then what they saw, two different things.
And,
But the Backdrop Police Department,
mm-hmm.
they still stood firm on the fact that that wasn't right and something needed to be done about it.
Which takes us back to where we started.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the focus has been on Ed Salmela.
Mm-hmm.
But you cannot look at Ed without looking at the death of Stacey Stites, the
Correct.
conviction of Rodney Reed.
Yeah.
Even as Isislas put in the chat, Joe Brandt, Gary Joe Brandt. There are so many spin-offs, so many related incidents. And as you also added to the mix, race would play a role. Not necessarily, and I've heard David Fisher say this. The people weren't that racist as much as law enforcement was.
Very correct.
And
That's
that threw me for a loop.
Yeah, law enforcement, it ran deep.
Yeah.
But with the community, we were just that, a community. And we looked out for each other. And when we saw somebody was being done wrong, we would stand up and tell, hey, wait a minute, da da da, no, that ain't gonna happen. But if you did that towards law enforcement, you're now enemy number one.
Right.
And something was going to happen to you. Whether you were going to get arrested for bogus reasons or you were going to be harassed for nothing at all. I mean, how many times can you ask somebody what their name is and not remember what their name is? You know, I mean, how many times can you look at somebody's driver's license and ask for it again 2 days later, a week later? I mean, there was just so much that they would do and get away with. Don't get me wrong. I went to that chief of police, the whoever I can't remember who the chief of police was before David Board, but there was somebody else because David Board was a sergeant at the time, and I remember I went to the chief of police and I just laid it out, and I told him, I'm like, he is harassing me. He is pulling me over constantly. I said, there's no reason for it. I put my driver's license on his desk. I said, I have a driver's license, but yet for some reason, this man seems to think every single week he's got to pull me over to check it. Make sure it still says driver's license on it. I don't know. And he goes, David Board's doing that? I said, yes, sir. And he goes, well, why do you think that is? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's my choice in men. And he goes, how old are you? I'm 18. And I'm married. And that's when the question came out. Well, who are you married to? And as soon as I said Ron Moore, all bets were off. He wasn't there to help me anymore. His whole entire demeanor shifted. And I remember that because it was a couple weeks after that, I believe. I ended up, so I had gotten into some trouble in high school. It was right before my 18th birthday. Or it was right before the summer I turned 18, I should say. And this girl got in my face, and I did what any respectable 17-year-old girl would do when another girl gets in her face, and I beat the piss out of her. Well, her dad decided that charges needed to be pressed. Even though his daughter was the one that started the fight, I just finished it.
Right.
Her father decided I needed to have charges pressed on me. So they took me to court and wanted to have me put in jail because I was 17 and she was only 15. And I told the judge what had happened, and his daughter sat right there and agreed with all of it, didn't dispute anything I had to say. But what was the problem? The problem was she got the snot beat out of her and I didn't. And everything was fine. I got a fine for it, and I was paying, a little bit here, a little bit there. I didn't have a job or anything like that, so whatever money I could scrounge up every month is what I paid, and they were fine with that until they weren't, and they weren't whenever I got married. Now all of a sudden, there are police at my in-laws' doorway to arrest me, and take me to the courthouse because I was now going to do community service. I was going to plant plants and dig holes and all this other stuff because the little bits that I was paying every month just wasn't enough. But that didn't until after I got married. After I got married, all of a sudden I had to do community service for a weekend. In other words, they just needed somebody to plant the monkey grass and the annuals and all that stuff that they had planted around the courthouse at that time. They needed somebody to do it. So there was me and a few other people. And, it's the funny part is when you put all of that group together, I was the only white girl in that entire group.
You see, these are the little things. These are the little nuances that people are the parts of the story that people don't hear.
Because they don't care.
Nor do they have anybody reliable to get that information from. You lived it.
That weekend that I had to do the community service, I was side by side with Yolanda.
Felix?
Yeah, they had her doing community service too. I don't even remember what for. It was something petty. But yeah, we were side by side that weekend.
Funny enough, Yolanda Felix said she saw the group of officers, main players, outside her home the night Stacy Stites went missing.
Yep, across the street in the school parking lot.
And Jimmy was there.
Yep.
Where the truck was found.
Yep.
Go figure.
Well, you know that Jimmy confronted Rodney, right?
Did he?
Yes. Jimmy confronted Rodney in front of Chris.
About Stacy?
Yeah. Told him that he was gonna see him dead. That he wasn't gonna be the one to kill him, but he was gonna see him dead. Chris told that story. Chris has been telling that story for a long time.
Which Chris is this?
Oh gosh, I don't remember his last name.
Oh,
but they're cousins. But he's cousins with Rodney on the other side. But they were walking up the railroad tracks, and Jimmy stopped. Rodney was coming home from work. Jimmy confronted Rodney right there on the railroad tracks. Told him flat out. So Jimmy knew what was going on. And he played as I didn't know. The hell he didn't. There's so many things that people have come forward and said. I was ignored.
You couldn't testify. They didn't allow you to testify, saying that you were too close.
They said I had biased opinion.
Yeah.
Do you know Rodney's attorneys couldn't even find Angela? You know why?
Why?
Because they were looking for Angela Hamby and not Angelina Hamby or Angelina Weiss. They didn't even know her real name was Angelina until I told them. But those were fighting words, and you never called her that because she'd punch you right in the mouth. She hated that name. I don't know why, but she did. When she was younger, she hated that name, and so she went by Angela. Call her Angelina. She'd fatten your lip real quick. I remember the first time I called her that, she turned around and slapped the piss out of me. I'm like, that? She goes, I don't like that name, and you know it. But no, she just, I had connected with her daughter for a little while. And then, you know, with the pandemic and everything else that was taking place, I, would help her out when I could.
Yes.
There were times where she would need Pampers, and I would get her some Pampers and send them to her via Amazon.
Yes. Yes.
Um, just little things like that. And then we just kind of lost touch. But I'm still here. If she ever needs me, she still has my number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she knows that I'm on Facebook. She can connect with me there.
Right.
Uh, Unfortunately, because I'm very boisterous about my opinions.
Mm-hmm.
My opinions don't match with a lot of people's. Um, I think, therefore I am.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
So, um, and I'm just, the cloth that I'm cut from, they don't make it anymore. And so people don't understand that it's okay to have your own opinions and your own thoughts, and it doesn't have to match anybody else's.
True that.
And when you are doing something to follow the in crowd, 9 times out of 10, it's the in crowd that ends up looking bad at the end of the day.
Mm.
And Bastrop PD, they were the ones that was leading that whole division. And if they couldn't intimidate you to stop doing whatever it was that you were doing, you were going to pay dearly. And that's why I left Bastrop. Even after my divorce, I didn't have to leave. I chose to leave.
Right.
Because I didn't want to deal with the drama coming from that whole situation. Um, because it didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter how smart I was. It didn't matter how educated I was. It didn't matter. None of that mattered to them. All that mattered to them is that I was a white girl that did the wrong thing by their standards. And Richard Hernandez wasn't even white, but still treated me the same way. I thought I would get at least a little bit of something,
Right.
but no, he was just as bad as the rest of them.
Well, he had to be in order to fit in.
Yeah, you got a point there.
So, you know,
I don't
Joe.
know. I just stop and I think about everything that I went through when I lived in Bastrop, and I think about how my life is today, I'm blown away. I'm completely blown away by the difference. You
Yes.
know, um, I'm accepting of anyone. If I don't like you, it's probably because you've treated me badly or you've treated somebody badly in front of me. Don't come to me gossiping about so and so, because if I've made you feel that comfortable that you can come to me and talk badly about someone,
You probably go
how
talk badly about you.
exactly how comfortable are those people making you feel for you to go talk bad about me?
Right.
So the minute you come at me talking mess about so and so, I cut you off. I don't have time. Now, if if it's somebody like David Board or Richard Hernandez or Rocky Wardlow or somebody like that, hey, I'm all for it. Let's talk bad about them together. But you know, don't 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 come at me with nonsense because I don't have time for it. You know.
Right. Right.
If I don't mess with you, it's probably because of the way that you are. People will tell you I am the sweetest person you will ever meet, and then there are some people that tell you I'm the biggest B word you'll ever find. Trust both of them.
Hey, I know both sides, and I never experienced the latter. So-
You never had a reason, right? You've always treated me with respect, and I've always treated you with respect, and that's just the way it is. I mean,
it is.
that's how our relationship began, and that's how our relationship will continue to flourish,
It
because
is.
neither one of us have ever disrespected the other in any way, shape, or form.
True that. True that.
And you taught me something a long time ago, and I still carry it with me to this day. I never make a promise anymore. I never make a promise. And if you ever hear me say, I promise, you know that I'm full of BS. Because a promise is what? A promise is something that you make to comfort a fool.
Right.
And so I don't use that word anymore. Not in that context.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I give you my word, I give you my word. And that is exactly, I have friends tell me all the time, I promise. And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear your promises. Give me your word. The minute you give me your word, I will trust that you are telling me straight up.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't hear that, I go on about my business, because I know you're full of something, because I'm not a fool.
Not at all. And
So,
Joy, I want to thank you for shedding this bit of light on this situation, giving us another perspective
everybody
on.
needs to understand that Bastrop was not this pretty little perfect town that all of these reporters are trying to make it out to be. Mainstream media, they're full of stuff
Mm-hmm.
that isn't truthful. Because I've listened to some of these reports, and this wasn't the perfect little town that they try to make it out to be. In the sleepy little town of Bastrop, Bulls Pucky, sleepy little town, my foot.
Hey, listen, people wouldn't know unless they speak with someone who was really there and will honestly tell you as it is. And that person tonight has been you.
I'm glad I could be there for you, brother.
I'm glad you could be here for me too. Trust and believe. And I thank you.
You're welcome. I am going to bed now.
Get yourself some rest. You know you're going to need it.
Yeah, I know. I've got so many orders sitting in my cage that are all for our military lines. It's
Hmm.
crazy.
And don't go driving to work playing that devil music.
I swear, that's what I told that officer. I said, Officer, sir, I'm so sorry. I was listening to that devil music, and that devil music just makes my foot so heavy. And I didn't realize it, and he had me dead to rights. But
Mm-mm.
because I had him cracking up laughing before he walked away from my car, he said, you know what? Go on to work, have a good day, and be safe. You too, Mr. Officer, sir. You be safe too, sir.
Joy, you're
If,
something else.
if you can make them laugh, that's all you gotta do. Just make them laugh, you know,
Yeah.
and they're more inclined to walk away from you, because how can you? It's like trying to beat somebody up in flip flops. You can't do it. You just can't. Flicka, 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 flicka is all you hear.
I can't.
All right. Well, I'm going to bed now.
All right.
Now I'm starting to talk nonsense. So
You take care, Joy. We'll keep in touch.
you too.
All right.
Good,
Thank you
good night
again.
to your people out there too. Y'all have a nice evening.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joie Monfort. Another one of my sisters from another mister. And you heard it from her. Things in Bastrop aren't quite as it was portrayed in the news or by whatever media house that you've come across presenting some of this information. Unless you speak with someone who has been there, someone who has lived it, you'll be led astray. And those who think they know what is going on, think that they know how things were run at the time in that place, they have it all twisted. The ones that give you the story that say someone like Ed Salmela went and was in such a bad place from the breakup of with his girlfriend that he took his own life. Think about the other parts of the story that you didn't initially hear. Think of the fact that he couldn't hold a gun in his left hand but yet still shot himself in the left temple. Doesn't make sense. How is it that your neighbor is gonna come to his rescue, or come to check and see what was going on, find a locked door, go call the cops, come back and find a cop already there, the door not kicked in, only for it to be a cop who used to live there, same cop that took charge of the investigation? The family didn't get to look at the scene because they were told that it was too gruesome. This is what Scott told me. Scott is one of the brothers of Ed Salmela, the person whom this focus has been about tonight's broadcast. It has been really about Ed Salmela and the kind of person that he was. You hear Joy talking about the person that he was. A good person. And you hear about some of the corruption that went on in and around Bastrop at the time. You hear about the culture of the place. You hear about the racism. You hear about the KKK meetings. Not from someone who thinks they knew what happened. It's from someone who knows exactly what happened because they were there. They experienced it. They were married into it. Because the family that they married into experienced it firsthand. This is what we got tonight. And although Lee didn't get to join us, another brother of Ed Salmela, the story still came out, or parts of the story still came out. You just didn't hear it from a sibling. We're gonna part company. In the background, you hear music from Nikki Blaze, a track called Lost in Illusion. And that's what some people were, even prior to this broadcast. I'm pretty sure that now you can see some light. You have a different idea of what happened. Now you can ask some other questions as to what really transpired back there in 1996 in Bastrop. You could now question some of the information that you got before. You can ask the question, why was Joie Monfort left out of the 2020 special relating to Stacey Stites? Talking about the girl in the pines. That was the title of the 2020 special. Why was her interview left out? Questions that you could ask. If you went and searched about Ed Salmela, you'll find Scott Salmela talking to Dr. Phil. You'll find various reports, and they all link back to the Rodney Reed conviction, the Stacey Stites murder. You can ask why. So many questions. And legitimate answers not given. You look at as Isislas pointed out, or I should say the name properly, Isislas, as she pointed out, Melissa Lucio, Darlie Routier, these people had some of the very same players relating to their cases. More questions that need to be asked. What's going on here? If we could just have a little bit more clarity, then we wouldn't be as lost. We wouldn't be as torn when it comes to some of these convictions that have happened. And sad to say, it still continues. And this is in the state of Texas. So could it possibly be happening in other places? I believe it can. And I believe it does. But where do we stand? We, the ones who can actually are free to ask certain questions. Are we asking questions? Are we demanding answers? Are we instituting change? Are we being agents of those changes? What are we doing? As we part company, I want to remind you to look out for members of your community. Your community is not just the development that you live in, but it spreads far and wide. The people that you pass on the bus, the plane, the boat, or the train, whether you walk, ride, or drive, these are members of your community. Do something good for one of them today, because you never know who's going to do something good for you tomorrow. My name is Kevin Steele, and this is how I like to do it to you, for you, and with you. The night shift to DJ Kevin Steele happens on a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Check me out right here, kevinsteele.com. Joy says, root cause. You must ask why until you can't ask why anymore. Yeah. Get all your answers. That's just like a child. They come to you and they ask, so why? And then they ask another why. And they ask another why. And you get frustrated and you often tell them, you know what? Be quiet. Go sit down somewhere. Go do something. Go whatever. These same children are the ones that embrace you because they like you, the person, not because of how you look. That's something else that is taught somewhere along the line as you grow up, and you taint the purity. That's a word, right? Pureness. So let's keep things pure. Let's not taint it. Let's not get lost in illusions. My name is Kevin Steele. Wishing you a good morning, good afternoon, good day to you wherever you are in the world. From right here in South Florida, I bid you all a good night. Be good. If you can't be good at it. Until we meet up again, I'm out of here.
Greetings and salutations, one and all. You're invited to tune in to the night shift with DJ Kevin Steele. It airs on Mondays with Community and Finance, Tuesdays with Healthy Love, and Wednesdays with Real Talk from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Come spend some time interacting in the stew pot where we keep things bubbling and wind down in musical therapy. The night shift with DJ Kevin Steele is on kevinsteele.com, where you're encouraged to have acceptance through enlightenment.